And started. Oh no, I did. Never mind. And then the it's recording already. And do you want to? Janine?
Can you hear us?
Maybe away from.
Yes,
Some tech-
yes, I can.
Yes, we had some technical difficulties last week, so we're just making sure that.
Try your clicker.
Good? It's not good.
Yeah, let me click on it. Hang on. This is what I was talking about. Okay.
Good?
Say it again. There you go.
Yeah.
Good.
And Janine, can you see the slideshow?
Yes.
All right, we're becoming professionals here. Well, thank you everyone for joining us in person. And also for those of you online, thank you for joining us. I think we have, I saw 17 or 18 people online. 21? All right. So thank you for joining us today to, let me go back, discuss not only a few of the changes we're making with our stationary source regulations, chapter 030, but these workshops are really intended to address implementation of the regulations. I will say, you know, the building of the regulations was a few years of work. Implementation proved to be as much work, if not more. But hopefully we can all work together to get through the regulations and understand how they're being implemented now. But I want to start off by saying that, you know, if at any point you have questions with how to submit an application or really any changes that are being made because of these regulations, please feel free to reach out to us. We want to be there as a resource for you so that we can answer questions and work together to make you successful in submitting applications or understanding your permit. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. And I'll introduce myself. I'm Josh Ristori. I'm a supervisor of permitting and compliance for the Air Quality Management Division. I've been with the division for a little over 11 years now. And I'd say past 5-ish years, been the supervisor of permitting and compliance. So to start off, I like to always discuss the mission of air quality because I think it really plays into what we're going to discuss today, especially the reason for the changes that we made. We seek to create air quality solutions to create clean air. That's our goal. We're delegated by Region 9 EPA to do so, and specifically delegated to enforce stationary source rules, which is what we're going to discuss today. We've got 4 branches of our division: monitoring, which monitors the air out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have a planning group, which really helps us revise rules, update rules, implement rules that we need to stay in compliance with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards here in Washoe County. And then we have permitting and compliance, which really work together to issue permits to different or various sources in Washoe County, and compliance to go out and ensure that those permits are being followed, as well as other regulations. And also, you know, want to discuss how air quality fits into the strategic priority of the health district. We're part of the priority associated with the healthy environment. So creating a healthier environment that allows people to safely enjoy everything the county has to offer. And we do that by protecting people from the negative health impacts of environmental issues. So chapter 030, source permitting. I'm just going to read from the slide here. There's a lot there, but it's basically a background of why we implemented a lot of changes to our stationary source rules. But ultimately, it establishes the requirements for air pollution control and air quality permitting sources of regulated air pollutants within Washoe County. These requirements are used to protect public health. That's our main goal here. Establishes minimum thresholds for air quality permitting, air pollution control requirements, and exemptions from air quality permitting requirements. A big difference between the regulations as they sit now and what is going to be implemented on January 1st, 25 is the thresholds. We have right now a threshold of 2 pounds per day for a facility to emit. That's the requirement to hold a minor source operating permit. And that is being moved up to 5 tons per year. So there's some sources out there that may not require a permit going into 2025. We're working hard to identify those sources and to notify those sources of that change. And there's a true exemption section in our regulations. So I would encourage everyone to look at that exemption section to see if there are any emission units that you have at your facility that may fall under those exemptions. It also establishes more clear application, monitoring, reporting, record keeping, and testing requirements. Our current regulations are about 25 to 30 years old. So this is a big update. We felt like we did a good job of trying to organize them a bit better and separate them into sections. So if you're specifically looking for, monitoring and record keeping requirements in general, they're more easily found within the rule. But as far as this workshop's concerned, this is going to be first of what we anticipate 3 workshops. The second workshop will be in December. I believe it was December 11th. There's a slide at the end of the presentation to discuss that. And then we'll have another one in January, I think it's January 16th. And depending on the appetite for the information, we may continue to have these workshops just as a resource for sources to come to us and get information. We've been discussing also having sort of like office hours available for sources to come ask questions or get assistance with applications, things of that nature. We realize that it's a big change, and we want to do our best to support the community to be successful in, again, applying for permits and staying within the regulations. But at this presentation, we're going to talk about reporting requirement changes. So annual emissions reporting, annual fee changes, actual emission fees versus allowable emission fees, expiration date changes. So expiration dates will be updated on all permits to operate starting in January of 2025. And I put a little note down there at the bottom that, this workshop is really intended for minor source facilities or facilities that hold a minor source operating permit or a synthetic minor source operating permit. There's some aspects of it that would apply to a major source. We have one major source in Washoe County right now, and we work closely with them. So if there were any changes in the rules that would impact them, they're aware of it. But this presentation is really focused on minor source operating permits. So as far as the annual reporting requirement changes, we're changing on January 1st, 2025, the requirement to submit an annual emissions report to the Air Quality Management Division. If you're a regulated source out there and you're attending this workshop right now, you're probably accustomed to receiving a reminder from us approximately 6 weeks prior to the expiration date of your permit, requesting an annual emissions report or an annual throughput report. We would then use that report to evaluate your annual emissions from a prior calendar year and estimate fees, apply fees for your annual fee. We're moving away from that. We have a different fee structure now with the rollout of these new regulations. So whereas you may have been expecting that annual emissions report to come, it's no longer going to come as a reminder. It will be replaced with a memo kind of describing the changes that have taken place with our regulations. But something to really note here is that in the regulations, that paragraph 030040B13A, there's still a requirement to track throughput, to track your annual emissions, and to, at the end of the calendar year, to estimate your annual emissions, to make sure that you're staying in compliance with any permit requirements, any federal requirements, any local regulatory requirements. Compliance staff will be looking for those reports. And something else to point out is that we may still request annual emissions reports as part of our emissions inventory program that the planning division operates. And they typically will request those every 3 years. I just was meeting with one of the staff in planning, and they said the next time that request would come out would probably be in 2 years. because they're working on the emissions inventory right now for the past year. So just because we're not sending those reminders out and not requesting them to be submitted, that doesn't mean that you're not still obligated to maintain record keeping, monitoring within your company to make sure that you're complying with that section. So annual emissions report requests, again, they will no longer be sent to permittees. We still anticipate having that memo that we're going to send back to us. Please don't do that because we don't need it. It's really more for informational purposes. But if you do get that memo and you have any questions associated with the language on there, feel free to contact us so we can walk you through whatever your question is. So on that memo, we're going to discuss changes to the 030 stationary source regulations, changes to the annual emissions reporting requirements, changes to the assessment of fees based on an allowable structure, which we'll get into in this workshop, requirement to continue to maintain records sufficient to legally demonstrate the permitted equipment has operated in compliance with all required regulations. Again, that last bullet gets into the ongoing responsibility of a source to monitor and record throughput and emissions so that you can come up with that annual emissions at the end of a calendar year. Something else to note, in this past year, we were trying to work some of this implementation into our regularly issued permits. And one thing that we did do is we identified a change to the annual reporting requirements on the permits that we issued. And all permits that have been issued in 2024 with an expiration date of 2025 have this language in there, which basically states that you shall submit an annual report to us by March 31st. And what we're asking you to do is disregard that language. The permit that you're issued in 2025 will not have that language. Again, disregard that language. If you are required to submit something to our department, we will send a separate letter to your company requesting that information. So again, I want to reiterate, the annual emissions monitoring of a source is not going away, but the reporting of those emissions is on an annual basis. And we may reach out and say, hey, we need this information for this calendar year because we're doing an emissions inventory for planning, which is required by EPA. You may see that come in the mail. So it's still important to keep those records, maintain those emissions, those emission reports on an annual basis. If you have any questions about what you should be maintaining as far as what records should I be keeping or what emissions should I be tracking, if you look at your permit to operate, there will be a section on there that has that information. So I would ask that you refer to the permit that you've issued. So what I want to do with each one of these sections is kind of put out there some homework. So if you're asking yourself, okay, well, what do I need to do associated with annual reporting? This is what you would need to do. So first, what I would recommend is if you don't know where your permit to operate is, it is required to be posted at your facility. But find it and take a look at it. Review the annual emissions record keeping requirements. Basically, this information here. So we ask that you review that information and develop a system to track the throughput or annual emissions data throughout the year. What we have found in some cases is when we have asked for this information in the past, we would get a feedback from permittees saying, that was a year ago. I don't know what that information is. It's going to take me a while to get it. What we would ask is that it shouldn't take you a while. Come up with a system to track that, on a bi-weekly, monthly basis, so that at the end of the calendar year, you have that information accumulated and you can come up with your internal emissions report. Retain calendar year throughput annual emissions data. So retain those records specific to the throughput or annual emissions for a possible submittal to the Air Quality Management Division if requested, but also for compliance staff that's going to come out and inspect your facility. They are more than likely going to ask you for that information, so you should have that available to present to them. And lastly, with the throughput information, calculate your emissions on an annual basis. That's what the compliance staff is going to be looking for. If you have any questions on how to calculate that, please reach out to us and we can offer some assistance there. Okay. So moving on to the next section of this workshop, annual fee changes. Our new structure is going to be an annual maintenance fee and an annual emissions fee. It's somewhat similar in structure to the previous fee structure that we had. However, we're going to be using an allowable emissions fee moving forward. So all permits to construct and all permits to operate will be assessed that annual maintenance and annual emissions. Any source which emits more than 1 ton per year of hazardous air pollutants, so toxics, will also be assessed a HAPS source maintenance fee. And the annual maintenance fee is, again, applied to all permits to construct and all permits to operate. The annual emissions fee is, again, based on allowable emissions for each source. And what we did is we went through all of our sources. We looked at historical annual emissions reporting, and we came up with an initial allowable emissions for each source. And we applied that to each source for a fee moving forward. So that calculation is based on the highest single criteria pollutant for a source, and that's in tons per year. And allowable emissions for a source will be reassessed at any modification of that source or any renewal for that source. So at that time, whenever a source is submitting a modification application or a renewal application, one of the things we're going to ask for in the application is a facility-wide potential to emit. And from there, we will have the discussion with them on what their own will be, because there's a potential for an increase if you're adding equipment. And so this is a change. This is the change to the fee table. As you can see, there's that annual maintenance fee at the top. And we're doing away with the per pound fee. We were using that per pound fee in conjunction with those annual emission reports. That's going away, as well as the toxics per pound fee that we were using with the annual emission reports that were submitted, where we were calculating emissions from a prior calendar year. And we're moving forward to this annual emissions fee based on an allowable, which is really based on a facility's potential to emit, considering all limitations, whether that might be controls, limitations in operation hours, limitation in number of days operating a year, things of that nature. Along with those annual fee changes, all sources will be notified 15 days in advance of fees being assessed. So for example, our first set of permits where we're going to apply the new fees will be in January. So in the middle of December, we're going to send a notification to those sources saying, please be aware on July 1st, we're going to invoice fees, which will be available in our Acela database for access by the public or by those sources to make payment. Those fees will then be assessed on the first day of the month associated with the permit to operate's expiration date. So speaking about January, we're going to have a set of sources which have an expiration date of January 31st, 2025. Their fees will be assessed on January 1st. So those will be available for review and payment on January 1st. Invoices will be sent to the email addresses that we have on file for a facility and mailed to the billing address on file. I really want to emphasize the importance of making sure that air quality has correct contact information, both for the, or not both, but for the responsible official of a facility, for the billing, for an on-site contact, because we will be emailing these invoices out and any communication that we have about future workshops, changes, etc. We really want to be sure that we can communicate with all of the permitted sources. So when you receive your permit, take a look at the contact information on there. There's some contact information on the actual permit itself. As far as the payment, fees must be paid no later than 30 days after invoicing. Failure to pay those fees in a timely manner will result in an automatic late fee, 25% of the total fee due. We really want to emphasize using the Acela database to make those payments. It's much more efficient than sending checks in or making phone calls and having payments processed over the phone. We did include some instructions for making payment in this PowerPoint presentation, which will be posted on our website. So this will be a resource for you to refer back to for these links. But these Acela payment instructions are currently on our website. If you look at I think it's our payments tile on our website. If you go to that, there are instructions for making payments in Acela. So some annual fee changes homework, review the permit to operate. So again, find that permit to operate. If you don't know where it is, take a look at it. Find the expiration date on the cover page of the permit and create an appointment in your calendar to review and pay the fees associated with your permit to operate approximately 30 days prior to the expiration date. I really want to emphasize getting those fees paid on time. We don't like collecting late fees. It's not our intent. Sometimes it takes more time to chase people down to collect fees than we actually gather with those late fees. So let's work together and try to get those fees paid on time. If you have any questions about your fees, again, feel free to contact us and address those. So again, review the fees assessed and submit electronic payment within 30 days of invoicing. We've got some more links there that this will again be on our website for you to use as a resource. But the one NVUS will take you to the Acela database. If necessary, you might need to create an account. So that's another link for creating an account if you don't already have an account. In Acela, I would emphasize or recommend finding the permit associated with your facility. And from there, you can review contact information, billing information, email addresses, things of that nature to make sure that they're correct. If they're not correct, contact us and we'll get you the correct form to update those contacts. And then on our invoices that we send out, we're going to have instructions also there for paying invoices on the Acela website. Okay, expiration date changes. This is the last section of our presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions. So expiration date changes. So part of the regulation is, let me step back. Right now, what we do is every year we reissue a permit. In our eyes, it's not a renewal process, it's a reissuance permit. So we're taking the same permit and we're reissuing it to all of the sources. What we've established in the new rule is a true renewal process. And with that renewal process requires an application to be submitted, listing the emission units, providing a potential to emit, and other information that would be necessary to issue a effective permit to a source. Sources are going to be required to renew every 5 years. But in the next 6 years, our goal is to renew all of the current permits to operate out there. And in doing so, we have to establish new expiration dates going out the next 5 years, because we don't want to renew all. I think we've calculated potentially 800 permits in 1 year. We want to kind of push those out over a number of years. So we have come up with a strategy to do that. So again, going back to the renewal process, a true renewal will be required every 5 years. Once we issue that permit will be good for 5 years unless you make a modification, which will ask for an application for that, or the permit closes, or maybe you have a change at your facility that only requires a notice, not an application. So a like-kind replacement of an emission unit, something of that nature. So to manage the renewals of all of our permits to operate over the next 6 years, a new expiration date will be applied to all permits to operate using the matrix below. So expiration dates for existing permits to operate will change in the following manner. If you take a look at your permit to operate, and we'll go through an example. Permits with the last digit ending in a 0 or 5 will now expire in 2026. And I'm not going to read through all those, but it's a straightforward matrix. So I really encourage you to look at your permit number and understand what your new expiration date is going to be. These are going to be processed throughout this year. So they're not all going to go out in January. They're going to go out month by month, probably as you're accustomed to receiving your issued permit currently. That'll be the month in which you get your new permit with a new expiration date. So the permits again will be updated with new expiration dates in 2025 during the month the permit expires. This will be after the annual fees have been paid. That's when we will issue that permit with the new expiration date. So to provide an example, I cut out the top of a permit here. You've got your permit number and your expiration date, your current expiration date. And this is for a permit that would be expiring at the end of January 2025. It has the last digit of 4. So going back to that matrix. Did I mess this up? I think I did mess it up. Messed it up. Let's say that it had a digit ending in 0. I apologize. That permit would now expire in January of 2026. So I really fouled that up, and I went over this number of times. That permit would now expire in January of 2026. So based on the final digit of the permit number, the new expiration date will be January 31st of 2026. That expiration date will establish the time frame for submitting a renewal application in a timely manner. So with the new expiration date for permit to operate, let's say it's AR 16-0100 being January 31st, 2026. Again, that expiration date will establish the time frame to submit an application to renew in a timely manner. And also it will, the month of the expiration will establish the month which the annual fees will be assessed. So taking a look at the renewal expiration date timeline, this is also new to our regulations as far as a timely submittal. For a minor source operating permit, a renewal application can be submitted 270 days prior to the expiration date. No sooner than that, but so between 270 days and 180 days prior to the expiration date is when we would anticipate a application to be submitted to our division. But something that's really important to point out here is that we have to have a complete application when that comes in. We have the opportunity of 30 days to determine whether or not the application was complete. So therefore, really this 180 days should be 180 days plus 30 days. Because if you do not submit a complete application, you submit it on at the 180th day, we determine that it's incomplete, that permit will no longer have what we call a permit shield and be able to continue to operate after the expiration date. Whereas if you submit it between 270 days and 180 days, and it's a complete application, and let's say we don't get you your new permit by the expiration date, we would continue to operate under the existing permit until we reissue or redo that permit. But we really want to emphasize complete applications. Really start working on your application for the 270-day mark, or at the 270-day mark, to give yourself enough time to complete the application, ask us questions, maybe consult with an environmental consultant, consult with your staff to make sure that you're submitting that application on time and that the application is complete. So taking a look at that permit we were discussing, If the new expiration date is January 31st, 2026, we would anticipate the earliest an application could come to us would be May 6th of 2025. So this May would be that we would expect the earliest applications to start coming in for the permits that are going to be reissued in January. The latest for a timely application would be August 4th of 2025. Okay. But again, stepping back 30 days for the best security as far as moving forward, the best date would probably be somewhere around July 4th of 2025 to give us that 30-day window to determine completeness. Once a permit does expire, that source loses its ability to operate upon expiration if a renewal application has not been submitted. There will be no permit shield in place. We won't have an application, and our compliance staff will contact that source to discuss shutting down operations. Sources that have not submitted an application, again, will be required to cease operation and will be required to basically start over again with submitting a permit to operate application as opposed to a renewal. So some expiration date change homework. Again, obtain a copy of your permit to operate. We always encourage everyone, no matter what type of source it is, take a look at your permit to operate often. Locate the permit to operate number on the cover page and apply the last digit of that permit number to the expiration date change matrix to understand your new expiration date. Right? This will give you kind of a look forward at what to anticipate as far as a future expiration date. And then calculate timely renewal application dates. Using that new expiration date, calculate the 270-day and 180-day prior to the expiration dates and put those in your calendar as a reminder of, hey, I probably need to start working on that application so that I have a timely, complete submittal. And again, submit that application between the 270 and 180-day period prior to the expiration date for a timely renewal of that permit to operate. So we always want to be engaged with our sources. If you have any questions about this workshop or any of the other changes in our regulations, feel free to send an email to aqmdpermitting@nnph.org. I think that's one of the best ways to contact us. That way we can, put your email in a queue and get back to you as soon as possible, as opposed to a voicemail. But if necessary and you want to talk to us on the phone, we love doing that too. So call our main line, 775-784-7200, and request to speak to the permitting branch. And you may also give us a call and schedule a meeting with us to discuss your permit. We'll set up some time where you can come in, or we can even do a virtual meeting over Teams if you're not local, to discuss permitting requirements, renewal requirements, those sorts of things. To view the revised Chapter 030 regulations, go to our website, and there's a tile there for regulations, and the new regulations are posted there for your review. And then just wanted to mention, like I mentioned earlier, we do have an upcoming 030 implementation workshop on December 11th from 12 to 1, the middle of the day. We'll record that workshop as well and post it. It'll be a hybrid workshop just like this. So if there's constraints on traveling, we'll still be able to attend that. We're going to discuss in that one changes to permits. So the changes to the naming of the permits, we're moving from an authority to construct to a permit to construct. Change in the function of source permits, and also how we're going to now implement converting a permit to construct to a permit to operate. So moving from a construction permit to an operating permit, or in air quality terms, an SR permit to a operating permit. We're also going to discuss application requirements. So similar to things we discussed today, but a little bit more in depth about the new applications, what modification applications look like, what does a change with notice mean, and renewal applications. We'll also discuss timelines, just as we did, because that'll be a reoccurring theme with these workshops, are the timelines. We really want to set everyone up for success, including ourselves, to be able to reissue permits in a timely manner. And we'll also talk about best system of control. Currently in our regulations, we have backed and layer defined, but in many cases, these really weren't applied because they were a little bit onerous, especially for small sources. So we've developed what's called a best system of control. And this is for sources that are emitting, up around 15, 20 tons PTE, requiring controls on those sources. But we'll get more into that at that workshop. With that, we'll go ahead and open it up for any questions. Again, I apologize for the error on the permit number there.
Josh, there's one question in the chat here. You hear me? Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. How will it be determined if a permittee needs to submit an AER?
So again, going back to the submittal of AERs, that is not going to be an annual requirement any longer. So the AER stands for annual emissions reporting. That's not going to be required to be reported to our agency on an annual basis any longer. It will be required to be completed internally and retained internally by your facility. If we do want that information, again, for an emissions inventory purpose or another purpose that might not be emissions inventory related, we will send notice in advance of that request, preparing sources for submittal. So that's how we would notify. And we would probably do that both physical mailer, but also notifying everyone that's a contact on that source. So we've got various contacts from billing, responsible officials, on-site contacts. We'd probably do more of like a shotgun approach to send that information out just so that it gets to the right people. Anything else, Janine?
Yep, another one just came in. We obtained an ATC 103124. Does our PTO permit, when we get it, come under these new 030 regs?
It will. It will. The new regs will apply with that permit to operate that you will be issued once your ATC has been completed. I guess once your ATC has been approved, would be the best way to say that.
What factors would determine if you need that information? From the same question regarding to the AERs.
Well, ultimately, there's a requirement to retain it on site in perpetuity. As long as your facility is operating, that's your requirement annually to retain that on site. Again, planning has an obligation. Our planning department has an obligation to the EPA to conduct an emissions inventory of Washoe County on a triennial basis. So every 3 years, they gather emissions data from various sources in Washoe County, that being point sources, non-point sources, and they have to put together this inventory every 3 years. That would be probably the most common reason that we would request that information.
Then a new question. If our facility's permit to operate expires at the end of November this year, will there be a revised inspection or expiration date?
The revised expiration date won't come until next November when that permit's reissued. So your permit now expires in November of 2025 is what I'm assuming. So come October of 2025, we will send out a notification letting you know that invoices are going to be assessed at the beginning of November. And from that point, once those fees are paid, we will send out the revised permit with the new expiration date. We have a in-class question.
How will your guys' annual compliance inspections be conducted? Currently, they're done typically right before the permit expires each year. How will you go about it in the future?
We're going to apply the same matrix. We actually do apply the same matrix currently to inspections as we do with permits. So those should align. And if it's a source, and we have a standard operating procedure for inspecting sources. So sources that have a greater or may have a greater impact on our airshed, synthetic miners, SM80 sources, Title 5s, sources with limitations. Those are inspected more frequently for that SOP. Other sources are inspected on a 5-year basis based on that matrix. So it would coincide with a renewal.
If we're annually inspected now, we would expect to be every 5 years.
You would probably still expect to be inspected annually
Okay.
because that is not going to change. The compliance portion will not change.
Okay.
It's
Would that occur in the same month of the expiration date each year, or would it be kind of, I guess, the schedule?
more than likely it would occur in that expiration date month.
Okay.
It's I would say in and around.
Okay. So it's probably similar to what we're doing now. We just expect the same.
I would expect the same for compliance inspections, yes.
More questions.
Go ahead.
Will compliance staff request current throughputs or just the previous year's throughput report? Like you said, keeping track of that PTE each year. Would they request what's currently going on right now or just the previous?
I think that they would do both. They would probably look at previous to make sure that it had been done, especially if it's an inspection that's done once every 5 years. If it's an inspection that's done every year, they would probably want to see that you are at least keeping track of throughput or emissions throughout the year, depending on how you calculate those. If it's a source that we inspect in the middle of a year, so it's not at the end of a calendar year, because that's what we're looking for as far as annual emissions, calendar year emissions. If it's in the middle of the year, again, it would be looking at how you are doing proper record keeping so that at the end of the year, you're going to be successful in evaluating your emissions.
And keep going.
Keep going.
Will the permit fee schedule will the fees be due at the same time of each year, or will they be due based on when your permit expires?
They'll be due at the end of the month that your permit expires. So for the example that we gave, those permits, the permits that are coming up for January, those fees will be due on January 30th to avoid a late fee.
Okay. Permits that are expiring in July would be July, and so on.
Yep, so on and so forth. Yep.
And then going to the permit renewal timeline. So if we submit, let's say, like you said, 30 days prior to the 180 days, is it guaranteed that we'll hear back from staff within that 30 days on whether or not the permit application is complete? Or would we need to submit prior to that just to be sure?
That's our obligation, it's 30 days. So if we don't get back to you within that 30 days, then essentially that's more on us.
Okay. Would we still be covered under that like permit extension
Likely, yes.
shield period?
I really want to encourage not get up against those deadlines.
No, that's fair. And then my last question was, will the emission source test requirement due dates change with the permit expiration date changes? So,
We have not discussed that, so they would stay consistent with what they are now.
okay, so we'd operate the same.
Yep.
So even if our permit expires mid-schedule, like if our source test is every 5 years, but our permit expires within that 5-year period, we still assume that we're doing a source test.
Correct.
That's all I have.
More online. Janine?
No more online.
I hope I clarified the annual emissions reporting requests. Again, if you have any questions.
Sorry, I still have one more question.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
For the fees, you said you're calculating it on allowables, not potential. Correct?
So what we're calculating is an allowable fee, correct? But allowable could be a potential.
Historical reporting now.
Yes, it's based on historical actuals. So for this first round of assessments of allowable fees, the only data we had was actuals. So that's really what we looked at to understand what the allowables were. When we renew a permit, we're going to ask for a facility-wide potential to emit.
Oh, that wasn't previously happening.
Wasn't previously happening.
Gotcha. Okay.
Consistently, let me put it that way. Some of these permits haven't been officially renewed. You could be saying 20, 25 years.
Right. Yeah, it was like very administrative.
Correct.
Right. So then going forward, it's still going to be based off of some amount of actuals for the fee, or it's more or less moving towards what your potential to emit is.
Correct.
Okay.
Unless that potential to emit includes, I mean, I guess it's still a potential to emit if it includes limitations, right?
Yeah.
There's a unrestricted potential to emit that we'll look at. And then if you say, well, I don't want a potential to emit of 80 tons because I want these limitations in my permit. I want my allowable to be 50 tons. And we would look at that as being your allowable, but we would put conditions in that permit that keep you within that allowable.
Gotcha.
Yep. Good question. Any questions or comments? Can you move that back? Contact. Here. Sorry, don't look at the screen. Here we go. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to email us or give us a call. Hopefully we'll be able to give you a proper answer. But we'll look forward to seeing everybody at the next workshop on the 11th. And thank you for coming tonight. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Everyone?
Can we request the public input?
Nice to meet you.